The Carpenter and the Cradle, a History Weaver Adventure, Book 1, by Connie Worden, read by the author. Chapter 42. Coe's eyes, adjusted to the darkness like a mountain cat's, had no problem picking out the outlines of the dwellings. He'd guessed right. There was the village, right where he'd expected it to be, in the thick forest and across the river. On the other side of the mountain. Clues he'd picked up all his life from the men of his village regarding the location of the enemy village had proven to be helpful. The largest dwelling, surely that would belong to Zhao. As silently as the mountain cat whose eyesight his resembled, Coe crept to the entryway of the headman's dwelling. He placed the hardened clay tablet where it couldn't be missed. Anyone exiting the dwelling without looking down would stumble over it. Yosa and Hab would surely know what it meant. And from this point on, he'd have to leave the results up to fate. He'd done what he could do. "Who's there?" a hoarse whisper behind him demanded. Coe turned slowly around to face the source of the voice. He thought he recognized it. To his relief, it was, in fact, Hab. Yosa was with him. They, too, had been as silent as cats in the dark. "You're keeping watch," Coe said matter-of-factly. "No, just returning from a night's hunting. Nothing doing, no luck this time," Hab said casually. "But what are you doing here, little brother? Are you here to do us good or ill? Have you decided to join your fate to ours, or are you spying?" Coe didn't answer the question, but stooped and picked up the clay tablet. "I brought you this." "What is it?" Yosa asked, squinting at it in the dark and holding it up as though to examine it by the light of the stars. "Come on, let's go somewhere away from here where we can have a light and talk properly." They trudged silently in the direction Yosa led them until they were out of sight and sound of the village. Hab built the fire, and Yosa held the tablet up to it once it was burning brightly. "Can you guess what it means?" Coe asked. Yosa frowned, the firelight casting odd shadows across the lines of the frown. "Maybe," he said. Then he thought for a time before answering again. "I think this is a location, the source of the 3 rivers between the mountain peaks. This mark, is this the cave? This is near where Hab and I met you in the meadow. You were staying in the cave with Lemo. We were watching and waiting for our opportunity to talk to you. After I'd escaped from the fire, I led the men and the dogs up the mountain. But they couldn't find me. I hid in the cave, and Hab knew where to find me there because it was our secret meeting spot when he was first leaving his people. So I think this drawing is pointing me to the cave. But what's the drawing above it? Is it the first seat?" "No, not the first seat. That's still with the other sacred pieces. This is the sacred cradle." "Ah, you don't know. The cradle is the first seat, Dove." Coe was too puzzled to say anything. "The first seat that you have in the council chambers, that which Lemo uses for the judgment seat, that is what your people made for your leader. Our first seat is the cradle." "The sacred cradle is really the first seat? That's what you use the cradle for?" "Yes, when it's not being used as a cradle. See how it turns into a seat? Like this." On Coe's drawing, Yosa showed him the piece of the cradle that would fold down to close in the box of the cradle and form the seat. "It's the first seat of Zhao, and the cradle of Zhao. When an heir is born, it becomes a cradle and holds the heir. But it is, by rights, the first seat of Zhao." "We didn't know it was the first seat. We call it the sacred cradle, not the cradle of Zhao, but I think now it is the cradle of Zhao. I mean to return it to him. He has the ruling rights. I believe they were stolen from him by the rebels." Yosa shook his head. "No, not stolen. It's not Zhao's way to rule any who refuse his rule. And to him, the cradle doesn't represent any right to rule. He needs no object to give him the right to rule. He is the rightful ruler of his people. All those who accept his rule, that is. He's the rightful ruler regardless, and his rule is right because it isn't based on force. Those who choose rebellion can choose it. To him, the cradle is precious, but not for the reasons Lemo's people think. To him, it means the passing on of the knowledge that he wants passed on from generation to generation. That's why, when the sacred pieces were taken by the rebels, Limo's people, I mean. In the raid, when you were taken, Zhao didn't fight to return them to his people. He knew someday you would return to your people. But he is patient. The meaning the sacred pieces carry is what's important. That is still passed down from father to son and mother to daughter amongst our people. I started to believe you'd been telling me the truth when I started to think about why none of my people knew the meaning of the symbols on the sacred pieces. That's when I started to believe they didn't belong to us by rights. And then I knew you were a truth-teller. Ah, so that was what made you change your mind. Yes, Ko said simply. That and his instincts that told him Yosa was a truth-teller. The cradle is precious to Zhao because of the burdens it's carried. First, the symbols and their meaning, and then the sons who are his life's blood. His sons? Yes, Dove. Ko, as you were. Dove you shall be from now on if you are returned to us. Me? I'm his life's blood? In spite of his determination, there were definite, un-warrior-like tears in his eyes at Yosa's words. Yes, Dove. How can I be sure he'll welcome me back? I'm one of the enemy. I was part of the men who, you know. You mean you helped kill me. Yes, I know. Ko/Dove gulped to hear the fact spoken so brazenly. You mean tried to kill you. It didn't work, though, did it? Didn't it? Yosa's eyes twinkled at Dove in the firelight. Are you sure? So, given that fact, how could Zhao possibly want me back? Dove, he sent me to you when the time was right. He sent me to rescue you. You mean that day at the river? I thought Hab sent you then. Besides, the council fire and its decision and the hut and the fire, your execution, that all came after. Zhao couldn't possibly want me back if he knew all that. You're his son, his life's blood, as you say. I was just his adopted son. But then I became one of the enemy. I was lied to, I see that now, but I was his enemy. And now you're coming back to him. If I could forgive your part in the council fire and the execution, don't you think Zhao could? I don't mean that Zhao sent me to rescue you that day by the river. That was only a small part of your rescue. I mean, I had to go right into the midst of your people. I had to face the execution. That was your rescue. That was what brought you back to us now. I don't understand. Those were the true enemies you had to be rescued from, your own people, your own self. Do you understand now? You mean... Hab, who'd been listening in silence to the exchange thus far, chimed in. It was the execution and the pursuit that led you out and led you to Yosa. Don't you see that, Dove? You mean you knew it would happen when you followed me into the village? Of course, that was obvious, wasn't it? Of course I'd be taken for a traitor and a spy and the enemy. But it's really because the rebels know me as the rightful ruler. That's the real reason I had to be put to death. The rebel contingent cannot abide the rightful ruler showing up. Dove digested this in silence for a moment. You? I thought the rightful ruler was Zhao. Dove, how do you think I know for certain that Zhao will welcome you back? How do you think I know just how Zhao feels? Are you? Yes, I'm Zhao. But you can't be. You're too young. I thought you said you were the son of Zhao. I am the son of Zhao, and Zhao himself. And I'm not quite as young as I look. Zhao/Yosa leaned back and let out a delighted chuckle. Dove didn't quite see the joke, but the laugh was so contagious he laughed along a little. He was more confused than ever. His head was spinning from the barrage of new information it had just retained, or refused to retain. It would need some time to sink in and get sorted out. That's a very good drawing, Dove, Yosa said, passing the tablet back to him. I tell you what, though, you keep it. I know where the cave is and I know where the cradle is, but I don't need it anymore. You're all grown up. It can stay there. Why don't you keep it for your own son? You keep this drawing you made for me and give it to him along with the knowledge of the symbols and the sacred pieces. This tablet, it will last many years, many, many years. Not like a wooden cradle. That may not last. It's the knowledge that I'll teach you. That's the important thing for you to pass on to your son and to your daughters. That's what we must keep alive, the history. But this tablet can be a good reminder. Yosa looked once more at the tablet in Ko's hand. I still need to tell you the story that goes along with the symbols and the sacred pieces, but we'll do those lessons another day, tomorrow perhaps. It's late, or it's early, it's nearly morning. Let's get what sleep we can before the sun shows himself, the nuisance. Yosa was in a jolly mood, it seemed. He laughed at his own joke. Then he put one arm around Dove's shoulders and pulled him close as they stood up. Come on, son. I've waited long to see this day. I've waited long to say this to you. I'm glad you're home. And now, let's go home. Georgie returned in a moment, carrying something in her hand she couldn't take her eyes off. Her expression was fearful, as though afraid she might drop it and smash it to smithereens. Coral had an instant of realization that it was very possible Georgie could drop and smash the precious object. James must have meant what he said when he told them all it was now Georgie's to do with as she wished. If he saw it only as an artifact with $signs written all over it, he never would have allowed it to come out of safekeeping and incur the possible danger of being broken. The doubts that had been playing around the edges of her mind were finally set at rest. James was to be trusted. His regard for Georgie was stronger than his regard for the value of the artifact. Georgie had nothing to fear from her stepfather, and never had. Except for Lady Cromarty, who maintained her position and her dignity, the group clustered around James' lounge chair to see the clay tablet that Georgie passed him. Coral nearly fell over the back of the lounger as she caught her first glimpse. All around her she could hear the sharp intake of many breaths, and then the babble of voices all at once, exclaiming or explaining. On the cradle! Those are the symbols we saw in the cave. We found a cave that the map led us to, and inside it we saw some pictographs on the back wall. They looked just like the symbols on the cradle. Will, dig out your phone. Show James the picture you took in the cave. I knew it. I thought those drawings would turn out to have something to do with Georgie's sketch. I thought they looked similar. How'd they get there, though? We'll never know, will we? You know something else that's still bugging me, Will put in. Remember all that strange furniture we saw in that underground hole that one day, and we saw that footprint by it? I haven't had a chance to tell you all. I went back another day to get the ladder we left there. I climbed in again just to see the room one more time, and the furniture had all disappeared. I found an old mine shaft entrance that it seemed like the furniture had been taken out of, and there were footprints and tire tracks there. But what I'm thinking is that the symbols in the cave and on the tablet were the same ones on the furniture. Actually, to be fair, that was Coral's idea. He caught himself. Except on the cave wall and the tablet, they're collected all together. Each piece of that furniture in the old mine had a symbol carved on it, remember? I think they were the same symbols. Everyone started talking at once. They were gone? How could they be gone? They must have had something to do with the cradle, don't you think? From out of the confusion, James somehow managed to correctly glean the information that the symbols on the cradle of the clay tablet were represented in a painting in the cave up the mountain. When this bum leg heals, I'm heading right back up there. I have to see those. I don't know who to tell about them, but we should pass this knowledge on to the world somehow. It's your discovery. It should be your decision. But I think you should go public with it. If the cave drawings turn out to be ancient, that will lend weight to this tablet being ancient and authentic, and the tradition of the cradle. I think I can clear up part of the mystery of the furniture in the old mine, Georgie offered. Expectant eyes turned on her. I think that Joseph must have been behind that disappearance of the furniture. What it was doing there in the first place, I don't know. Or how it's connected to the cradle and the tablet and the symbols, I don't know. Maybe there was a whole collection of pieces like the cradle that went with it. I do know that Joseph, when I still thought he was James, must have discovered the old mine after I left that shed of Fern's parents, 'cause James found me there and I ran away from him again. I found the old mine the next day by accident when I was hanging out by that old stone bridge and looking for a place to camp out. I wondered what that mound of stones was. You know that pile of stones near there? And I went snooping around till I saw the opening of the mine. It was kind of hidden with some brush over the entrance. I stayed in it for a while, keeping it pretty hidden every time I'd come and go. At least, it was out of the weather and a place to hide. I borrowed a flashlight from your shed, Eagles. I have to remember to return it to you. Anyway, I went exploring in the tunnel one day and realised that there was loose dirt that was blocking the tunnel. I don't know if it was from a cave-in or if someone blocked it off on purpose. Anyway, it was pretty loose, so I could make a hole in it to wriggle through, and I found that little room, sort of, and all that kind of like furniture, I guess. I probably left the footprint you saw. Then I went out somewhere for a while, and when I came back, I saw the tire tracks and prints of boots and went back to that little room and saw the furniture gone and realised that Joseph, except I still thought he was James, had somehow traced me to the old mine. He had to be the one who went in and got out the stuff. I suppose he blocked the room back up because it was covered in again. Let's see your feet, Will said to Georgie. What shoes would you have been wearing? Without a word, Georgie went to get her running shoes. These are the only ones I had, she said, handing them to Will. He examined the bottoms. I saw these prints at the entrance, he said after a moment. These were the ones that I saw along with 2 men's prints. There was only one print in the little room because the floor was pretty dry. There was just the one damp spot, but the print inside the little room was different, and too small for your feet. You have pretty big feet for your size. Well, thank you, kind sir, Georgie said, pretending to be offended. So there are still some mysteries to be cleared up, Coral jumped in. Who else was in that little room? That footprint definitely didn't belong to any of us. And what did my brother do with the old pieces you saw, Will? If they belonged with the cradle, they're probably very valuable to a collector or a museum, too, James added. And what were they for? What do the symbols on them mean? June asked. Well, that part of the mystery I think I can help you out with. I was just about to pass on the knowledge of the symbols to you when we started talking about the cave and the old mine and the furniture. Everyone ready? Okay, gather round. Here goes. All the symbols were in a basic triangle shape. Like tents or teepees. Maybe that shape represented home to the people who made the symbols, Coral thought. The first was a simple triangle split down the middle. One half was empty, the other was filled in with scratchings. Like light and dark, Coral mused. The beginning, the Great Spirit made a home for his children. He made it light. He split it into light and dark, day and night, James said, pointing to the first symbol. All the group exchanged wide-eyed looks. That sounds familiar, Rex whispered. It does, doesn't it? James agreed. Just wait, it will sound even more familiar. This is really the narrative passed down with these pictographs from generation to generation from your tribe? Paul asked James excitedly. This is phenomenal. Why have I never heard of this before? Not my tribe, James corrected. I just have an interest. I learned it from another band. My people were all about the cradle and the supposed rights of inheritance of the eldest son of the chief that came along with it. This legend that I'm telling you here has been passed down through Victoria's tribe. This is her heritage. Cool, June breathed out. Should I continue? Yes, please, they all clamored. Sorry to interrupt, Paul interrupted again. I just got excited. Please carry on. The second symbol was a triangle with an L supported by 2 sticks inside it, like a sort of stick figure chair. The Great Spirit called up the sky to be his throne, James intoned, pointing at number 2. He called up the land to be the table to feed his children. He split the land from the sea. The third figure on the cradle was also a triangle, and across the top of the triangle was a flat line supported by 2 sticks, like a sort of stick figure table. Across the bottom of the triangle were what appeared to be waves. Number 4 was a triangle, again split down the middle. In one half was a half circle seeming to rise out of the bottom of the triangle, and in the other half was a crescent moon and little stars. The Great Spirit called up a great light and small lights to give light to the day and to the night. He placed them around his throne. He gave them to his children for lights and for times. This is eerie, July whispered to June. It's like he's reading out of the Bible in some version I've never heard before. How can this really be a native legend? June shushed her. The triangle for number 5 had the waves at the bottom again, and the split down the middle. At the top of one half were 3 flowing V shapes like 3 birds. At the bottom of the other was what appeared to be a fish symbol. The Great Spirit made life to live in the sky and in the sea. He filled them with life. Number 6 was harder to decipher. A figure like a W near the top of the triangle was supported by 2 lines connecting it to an inverted W at the bottom of the triangle. Coral's mind was running ahead of James's retelling of the pictographs' meaning. If it's like the biblical creation story, that one will have to be the animals and man and woman, she thought to herself. Oh, I think I see it. It's like 2 headless stick figures reaching up to the sky, just touching inside arms and legs. Last of all, when the home was ready for them, the Great Spirit brought forth his children. They shared the land with all the animals the Great Spirit had made. Number 7 looked like a stick figure bowl shape inside the triangle, and waves were drawn in the semicircle bowl. The new home the Great Spirit had made was perfect. Everyone was happy and everything was very good, with much food for all the children and the animals to eat. No one was hungry, no one was cold, no one was sick, no one was unhappy, and there were no wars. The new home was clean. Number 8, the last pictograph, looked like a cross or a small T at the top of the triangle, sitting on a table or box shape, an S twisted below the cross at the bottom of the triangle. But the snake people wanted to soil the clean house the Great Spirit had made for his children. He made the children to eat from the tree no one should eat from. There was rebellion. And from this comes warfare and hunger and sickness and cold in the land. That's it, James finished. So, what do you think? What do I think? It's stupendous. Why is this not common knowledge that this legend is in existence? Paul got up and paced the deck in his agitation as he spoke. James offered a wry smile. Maybe because of the snake people, don't you think? I feel like this knowledge would be very unpopular in certain circles. Paul considered for a moment. Yes, I see your point. You and I think alike, I see. I've come to, James said simply. Partially through hearing about phenomena like this legend, I got to be interested, and then I went from an interested observer to a committed believer in it. This isn't the only people group to have similar legends, you know. Powerful stuff, isn't it? I know we're not very loud voices in the archaeology or anthropology scene, but I really think this information does need to get out to the public. I have some contacts who work in these fields. Ethnic studies, I mean. I'll have to see what I can do, that is, if I may. Georgie, are you willing to share your inheritance with the world? We may have helped discover the drawings in the cave, but the clay tablet belongs to you. It's your call, if you want to share it with the world, and the meaning of the symbols on it. I haven't thought about it. It's completely new to me. I haven't properly taken it all in. I can see this all means something to the rest of you that I don't know what it means yet. June chuckled. I'll be right back. Running to the van, she quickly located the pocket Bible her mom always kept stowed in the glove compartment. Here, she said, handing it over to Georgie. Read the first chapter. That should clear up what we're all excited about. Georgie read, her eyes growing rounder and rounder. There's certainly something to this, isn't there? She said slowly when she finished. I'll have to do some heavy thinking about all this and about what to do with the tablet, if it's really mine. It is, James assured her. Happy birthday, baby girl, who is no longer a baby girl. Here's hoping the rest of your year is not nearly as adventurous as this start to it. Georgie smiled and sighed, a deep, contented sigh. I'm just glad that the worst part of it is behind us, and that we have each other again. It was so horrible to think that someone I'd loved and trusted could turn out to be evil. It was an absolute nightmare. Worse than anything else, even worse than when I got kidnapped by the real bad guy. James smiled up at her, his eyes glistening with moisture. Yup, the good times are back. New country, new town, new friends, new adventures, and a new name. Georgie, I like it. I might have to start calling you by it. What about a new name for you? I think it's time I started calling you Dad, don't you think? Yes, I certainly do, James agreed. His face shone, but no brighter than Georgie's, as she leaned in once again to throw her arms around his neck.